Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Block presented by Around the Block Sports Network. We're back at it again with a really good episode for y'all, and we're going to start with hockey as we always do. Sam, good to have you back here. How you doing, bud?
Doing great. Happy to be back this week.
Yeah, and not much going around in the NHL like we were discussing before the show, but we're going to continue a nice little trend we've been doing, and that's going over the NHL divisions for this upcoming season and breaking it down. And I believe you're going to start us off with a pretty well-known team throughout the past 15 years of hockey, especially had been a dominant team, then slowly has started to go on their way down towards the bottom of the league, even though they still have star players. So go ahead and introduce us.
Yeah, so kicking off our Central Division preview, I have the Chicago Blackhawks at 8. Now, Chicago obviously is in a rebuild, but what's interesting about their rebuild is they're trading away their young players too, right? They lost Kirby Doc and Alex DeBrincat in deals this offseason, and they got good returns for those pieces. But then, why would you trade these young guys if you're just going to get young guys in return? I mean, Doc was 21, DeBrincat was in his mid 20s. It's just such an interesting thing. It's like they really want to start completely over, except for Taze and Kane, who are still on this team. And that's, I think, their biggest question going into this season is what do they do with those two? Because it's obvious they're not in a position to compete, and those are win now guys. So do they look to trade them? Do they just have them play out the rest of their contracts? What is it they're going to do with them?
Yeah, you look at Patrick Kane, he had 92 points in 78 games this past season. And you got to think at the end of the day that he's still going to be chasing to be known as the best American born NHL player of all time. So I think he's still got a little bit of fight in him to go and get a cup. But right now, he's stuck on the wrong team to do so. And it's really interesting to think what they're going to be doing with Jonathan Taves too down the road. It definitely seems like an unusual way to try and reload this team, or even if they are rebuilding, like you said, they got rid of all their young talent, taking away their top goal scorer in Alex DeBrincat. But for me too, I'm looking at this team. They've got a new first-time head coach in Luke Richardson too. He played 21 NHL seasons as a defenseman, but this is his real first-time crack at head coaching, and it's in the top league, which is the NHL. So it's going to be interesting to see the respect that these guys are going to give Luke and his plans going forward. I don't know if really he had been part of the major conversations to get rid of the young talent or if it went to their GM. But you also look at what they've been doing over the past couple of years, trying to sustain this really good high talent group in Patrick Kane. They tried bringing in Tyler Johnson. He only had 7 points in 28 games this past season. And they've tried other multiple moves. I know acquiring Seth Jones was also a big one as well.
Right.
So for me, at the end of the day, it seems like they are doing a rebuild. I expect Kane and Taves to be out of this organization by this year. But as of right now, I'm really confused as to how they're going to rebuild this group.
Yeah, Patrick Kane, I would look to be a deadline deal for some cup contender this coming year. He's still an excellent offensive player, and I don't think they'll have a problem finding a deal for him and getting good return for Patrick Kane if they choose to go that direction. I think Jonathan Taze doesn't have much left, and it might just have to be a buyout or wait the remainder of his contract out. And fortunately for them, that Seth Jones deal already looks like a disaster. It's coming up on his first year this year. I think last year was an expiring deal, and now he's getting paid 9.5 million for the next 8 years. That is just an absolute anchor for this team. Just going to sink them, I think, for to have a contract that large for a defenseman who is not on the right timeline and is not an effective 1D. So for them, I think this year is going to be pretty bad. They were, I think, seventh last year, and they only got worse. This year might be rough for Chicago fans. Even if they have some nice returns and nice draft picks coming up, it's going to be a while before they're ready at all.
Yeah, but it will be a team that will be interesting to watch in the point of all these other teams looking to buy off of them. So they'll be sellers throughout this season. So it'll be interesting to keep up with them.
Yep, absolutely. We'll have to see. Seventh place, I have the Arizona Coyotes. another year for rebuild for Arizona. I don't see how they get out of this year. For them, they're playing in this college stadium this year. It might be one of the low points for the franchise. So for them, I just think they have to lay low. They have to focus on development and just hope this year shows some signs of life for their prospects who they keep drafting highly up. Hopefully one of them can finally click, help Clayton Keller and their defenseman, whose name is slipping my mind. Hopefully if they want to build around those two, Jakob Chychrun, I'm sorry. That's who I was thinking of. That's a young defenseman they can build around. Clayton Keller's a young forward they can build around. If they can have just some signs of life around those two and they can stay healthy, I think this is a year they don't finish in last place.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of go off of what you just said there. They got to stay healthy. I mean, if you look at this club based off of last season, only Phil Kessel and Shane Gostisbehere reached 80-plus games for this club, and that is just so crucial. Besides that, most players range between the high 50s and low 70s and participating in games this past year. So right off the bat, they need to get their organization and their staff corrected before they can even attempt to really make a run. But also, that also brings up a huge point in the sense of if you can get these guys healthy, that's going to get you so many more games. Just these guys, these young bucks playing with each other consistently throughout a season, not having the lineup shaken every night, every week. They could really benefit from them. And they also went out and added some physical presence in Zach Cassian, which, older guy, not really going to get you points, but he's going to stand up for your younger guys. So realistically, at the end of the day, you kind of just got to make sure this club is going to stay healthy for their success down the road. May not be this year, but definitely for years to come, especially when these young talent and prospects start to come up in the league.
Yeah, you said that health has been the number one issue for them over these last few years. And who knows what this stadium debacle will bring.
I think it's going to be cool, man. I mean, let's be real. I'm already looking at tickets to go see a Sabres game out there. I mean, come on now. Go take a quick trip. Go see an NHL game with like 5,000, 8,000 fans. I think it'd be kind of a cool atmosphere, at least for 1 year.
Yeah, we might look back on this as one of those niche cult-like sort of moments for this team. It could become lore if they're able to get something going in this stadium, some sort of exciting young team. It could be something really fun to look back on. Hopefully we can see some signs of life here for that to happen.
Yep. I think it's going to be really interesting because, for a team that's been struggling for a couple of years, they're going to need a new sense of identity. But who knows, maybe downgrading to a really small barn, it might just get their juices flowing, might make them think they're kids again, especially some of their older players. Who knows? You really never know what's going to happen, especially when they're making such a drastic change to their barn.
Yeah, it's definitely something unique they'll have. Hopefully it'll be unique in a good way. All right, so number 6, I have the Winnipeg Jets. And now Winnipeg is just such an interesting case for me. I sort of have a little hockey crush on them as a team. I love their offensive talents. I think Mark Scheifele is one of the most underrated top centers in this league. Kyle Connor and Nikolai Ehlers are fantastic wingers. And they have just incredible top 6 talent. Pierre-Luc Dubois, their second-line center, is excellent. But they just cannot make it work. Since 2018, it's just been a slow decline from real cup contender to not even in the playoff picture with essentially the same core on offense. Obviously, their defense is where they falter, but even in net, Connor Hellebuyck's an elite goaltender. So obviously they didn't make enough changes this offseason for any real changes to happen to their record. And last year, I think they finished 6th also. Rick Bowness, I think now, is stepping in as coach. His question is going to be, can he create some structure for this defense to help complement their offensive players?
Yeah, I honestly do think the Winnipeg Jets are going to have a pretty good season this upcoming year. You got to remember they had 89 points in the regular season last season. And for me, like you said, they really do have a good offensive unit. They've got some really good players to go out and score. The only thing that they lack, though, is their defense. And I'm not just calling out the defensemen. I'm calling about our forwards here trying to play defense during critical games, especially division games, because that's ultimately where they lose their games and they aren't able to go up the chart in the division standing. So they really need to figure out something. But I really do love this new addition. Well, kind of an old addition. Rick Boas coming back. He originally was with the club when they became an expansion team in the early 80s, and he's been around the National Hockey League as an assistant coach for a bunch of teams. Obviously, Dallas was his previous team before coming back to Winnipeg. So I do think that there's going to be some upside to this move here. Like you said, I think they're going to be able to bring out the defense, pairings and get that corrected, but also their forwards. I think they're going to be able to get coached a little bit better. And they're going to be able to execute a little bit better when it comes to defensive rushes that they need to step up and master. So this is a team right now that it's so hard too, because I think they're such a good team, but the division that they're in, I think, is so competitive that they're always on the outside or just in on the playoffs every other week. So going forward, I think nothing but high hopes for Winnipeg this year. I think they're going to get things corrected, and they could possibly move up in the standings compared to last year.
Yeah, luckily their core is still relatively young, so there is still time for them to figure out how to build something with this team and surround their offensive talent with some productive defensive players. I think the big thing that I didn't touch on is that their offensive guys, Ehlers and Connor specifically, who I've raved about, do not provide much defensively. I mean, not at all. I'm being kind when I say not much. And I think that's probably a big part of why they let up so many goals and they leave Connor Hellebuyck out to dry, essentially, because I think defense, as much as offense, is a team war effort, and it's about teamwork and shutting things down together. And if you're relying too much on your defensemen to do that, it's not going to work out. So for them, I think that's what the challenge Rick Bowness has for this year, is getting those defensive instincts in guys like Ehlers and Connor going forward so they can help guys like Pionk maybe take a little pressure off those guys. And that's how they
Yeah. I mean, like you said, too, they really do have a pretty decent goaltender in this league. So every single time I see them lose, or it comes around to the last month of the playoffs and you see that they don't have a steady into the playoffs, it's kind of a head scratcher just because of their offensive skill and having a pretty decent goaltender. It's just that all around defense and also playing special teams that they really do struggle with.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely something to keep an eye on. They're by no means close to a rebuild. It's just something that needs work. And in this division, if you need something that there's an obvious flaw, you're not going to finish in a playoff spot.
I agree.
All right, moving on to fifth, and what might be the sleeping giant of this division are the Dallas Stars. This offseason, Dallas lost guys like John Klingberg and Vladislav Nemesnikov and added Mason Marchment to their team. And, it's an interesting sort of mix here. I do love the idea of having this young core of Rupe Hintz, John Klingberg. No, I'm sorry, not John Klingberg. Jason Robertson and the defenseman Meyer Heiskanen. That's a great young core, and it's surrounded by nice veterans like Jamie Benn, former Art Rossman or Jamie Benn, Joe Pavelski. It's nice. It has the good makings of a team, but I worry about how much of a step back Ben and Pavelski specifically are going to take this coming year, because they're just approaching their late 30s at this point, and I don't think they really have it in them to make another deep run like they did last year, well into the playoffs.
Yeah, no, Dallas does alarm me, especially for the success they had last year, because if you really look at it, what does this team need? They need their actual stars to perform on this team. Tyler Sagan only had 49 points in 81 games, and Jamie Benn only had 46 points in 82 games. That's not enough for those high-caliber players. And the fact that you had Joe Pavelski being your leading point getter this past season, it's not going to last. It's not going to move on until this year. So expect a lot of downgrading from, like you said, Ben and Pavelski. But one guy that can really bring this group back up is a guy in Tyler Sagan. Like I said, for 81 games and only 49 points, that's nowhere near what he should be hitting. if he can come up and bring his points up by at least 20 to 25, I mean, it's a better increase. And realistically, that's where he should be. It's going to help his team overall, especially because, I mean, no team's going to thrive when your star players just are not producing at a high level. So it's really interesting to see what they're doing. I do think that they have a chance, especially in getting their new head coach, Peter DeBoer. I think with what he did in Vegas with that, misfits team, that's what I like to call it. I think he can really turn around basically any type of group, or at least get them to work harder. Because look at what he did in Vegas. They weren't the most talented, but they definitely worked the hardest. So I think this could be a really good improvement for Dallas. But if they don't get their success from their star players, then not good news for them going forward.
You touched on it with Tyler Sagan. He's the X factor to this team, and he's why I say they're a sleeping giant, because he is now 3 years only removed from being a genuine hard candidate. I mean, he is a bona fide first-line center. He's actually the highest paid player in the league this coming season, and there's a reason he got a contract that was 8 figures annually. Is because he is just as talented as they come. And, he's now a couple years removed from a very serious injury. Last year, he was just getting back into it. You can see he was rusty. He wasn't his full self. If he can get back to maybe not the player he was, but 85% of that gives him still a first-line center. Rupe Hintz is a second-line center. Jason Robertson is a first-line winger. And they still have these veteran presences that can help them into this playoff push. It's really something that you have to keep an eye out for, because they have the perfect mix of what you want, of young guys who can carry you through the regular season and veterans who are built for the playoffs.
Yeah, no, I think this team is evenly balanced with the veterans and the younger guys. And I think they do have the coach to turn this thing around and start getting back to some high quality hockey. I mean, you got to remember, they were a pretty good team in the playoffs too. It seemed like they did have some of their older guys to produce a couple good points here and there. But realistically, at the end of the day, I do think they need to establish an identity in the regular season to gain some confidence before they go into the playoffs, and really not just rely on hoping that a puck goes in for them in overtime in Game 7.
Yeah, obviously Jake Ottinger played so well in that series too. I don't know if you can expect that. Plus, losing John Klingberg this offseason, I think, will hurt them. Maybe not as much as you would think, but he's still a pretty potent offensive defenseman that drives a lot of play for them. So that's a step forward. Mason Marchment, they signed this offseason to a 4x4. It may not be what they think it's going to be. I'll be honest with you. Watching Mason Marchment, I love him, but he relies a lot on an offensive structure that the Panthers had last year to produce how he produced. I don't think it's really replicable that he's a 60-point guy. He's not really that.
Yeah, we'll see what happens coming up this season. It's really a flip of a coin, and a lot of these teams in the middle of this division are really a flip of the coin.
Absolutely. It could go either way. Moving on to number 4, I have the St. Louis Blues. And St. Louis, it's tough because they were a very competitive team last year, even if it was a little bit fluky with their goal luck, I think. But they took a step back this offseason for sure. They lost David Perron, and they lost Ville Husso, who was excellent for them in net last year during the regular season. And for those 2 losses, I think they didn't really make up for in any meaningful way. They signed Nola Chari, who's great. They have Jake Neighbors coming up, who might possibly be ready next year to produce. But I don't think they are the team they were last year, especially now that they only have one true great possibly good goaltender in Jordan Binnington. There's a lot to put on his plate.
Yeah, it is a lot to put on his plate, especially for a team that, if you really think about it, since they won the Stanley Cup, they kind of are all over the place throughout the regular season and going into the playoffs. They're able to grind it out, having some veteran players like your Ryan O'Reilly as their captain and stuff. But at the end of the day, this team is just, for me, it's not structured properly for a everlasting team in this day and age of hockey right now. Obviously, losing David Perron is a huge loss for them, in my opinion, because he's just one of those high-quality veteran guys that you need to sustain bad turnarounds in the regular season. He would be a guy that might be able to defend, proper teams if they're losing 3 in a row or whatever it may be. And then also Jordan Binnington, like you brought up, he really needs to step up on his A game because I don't think he's a goaltender that can really handle an entire regular season to himself and get them in good position. So that being said, I actually have this team falling a little bit just based off the losses that they've had this offseason. And I just think they're a team that's kind of messy. They don't really have a really good equal balance between veteran and young player development. So I'm kind of scratching my head when I see this one at 4.
Yeah, I see your point. I mean, they have a lot of question marks. Losing David Perron leaves a giant hole in their top 6 that they don't have a real answer to. So they're a winger short without a doubt. And Jordan Binnington, they rode him to the cup in 2018. He was the reason or 2019. He was the reason they won that cup. And he wasn't the same after that, right? That regular season that followed and the one after, he didn't look like that Jordan Binnington. This last playoffs he did, and hopefully he can be that guy again. But if he's just a playoff goaltender, they're going to struggle this regular season. They're going to it's going to be all about the playoffs for them and Binnington. And it's not a great position to be in when you're sneaking into the playoffs and you have to play the number 1 seed first. It's not a recipe for success.
I agree 100% on that.
So that's something to keep an eye on for St. Louis. They have some question and answer. In third place, I have Nashville. Now, Nashville, I love what they did this offseason. They took a huge step forward. They added guys like Ryan McDonough to that core, Nino Niederreiter to their top 6, added Kevin Lankinen to secure the goaltending spot. And they didn't lose a whole lot. Lost some bottom 6 guys like Luke Kunin and Nick Cousins. And they're in a great position, I think, around Roman Josi and Mattias Ekholm on defense to make a serious push this playoff year and maybe make some noise coming into this playoffs.
Yeah, no, this is kind of funny because this is the only team that I think doesn't really need a true number 1 center to have a really good regular season. Different when we hit the playoffs, but obviously we're just looking at the regular season here. I love that they went out and added Ryan McDonough, though. I think he's a true class defenseman that can really take over the defensive group and really be their captain. Also getting Nino Niederreiter, I think, is a pretty good pick. Older guy, but at the same time, I think this is a team that's able to make these veteran moves here and really benefit from them in the regular season. So I agree with you, actually. I think they're going to be up there in the standings by the end of the regular season and really make a push against a couple teams that we're about to mention coming up here. But I love everything that they've made in the offseason. And like I said, it doesn't really work too much around the league, but this is one of those teams that can really truly have success with no identity at a number 1 center.
Yeah, you touched on that. No number 1 center. Mikael Granlund is slated to be the number 1 guy for them this coming year. He's a good player, but serves better as a second-line center.
Yeah, definitely not a guy that can take over games by himself. He's definitely probably not the face of the franchise, but at the end of the day, it's just one of those teams. I don't know why. To me, they've got a really good core from their top line to their bottom lines. They get I like their coach. They get everybody to play very well. And in my opinion, I think they made the right moves, not going out and buying too much and not wasting a ton of money. So I think this is a really good position for them going into this season.
Yeah, it was smart, right? They took advantage of places where they could, right? Getting Ryan McDonough for cheap because Tampa was in a cap crunch. Signing Nino Niederreiter because he was just a guy that fell through the cracks. It was these small incremental moves that they took advantage of teams. Very smart moving. They just have to rely, I think, a lot on Philip Forsberg to carry that offense. But I think the defensive structure they have, especially with how well Saros was last year, I mean, my God, he's a good goaltender. They have some riches at that goaltender spot, I'll tell you. So I think with him, Roman Josi, and Mattias Ekholm, and now Ryan McDonough, they're going to be a tough team to score on, for sure.
I agree.
I think they just have enough offense led by Philip Forsberg, and now Nino Niederreiter's a middle 6 addition. They'll win a lot of games. And they'll be
and over the past couple of years, they've really never been like that flashy of a team besides the couple of years when they tried to get to the Cup final and obviously lost in the Cup final, but they've never been that flashy of a team. But what I've always been impressed by Nashville is they can go on some real losing streaks, but they are able to bounce back. That's how impressive this group is. So bringing in a guy like Ryan McDonough and Nito Niederreiter, who are also some class guys that are able to bounce back from really bad stances against some maybe some bad teams or get a couple losses in a row. They're definitely the players to turn this group around and really get them to start playing successful hockey.
Should be a good year for them this coming year. So in second place now I have the Minnesota Wild. This Minnesota thing is mostly just, I think, a projection of their moving forward, right? Their steps forward are guys like Matt Bolby, guys like Marco Rossi, taking huge steps forward, I think. And I think that's why I have them ranked so highly. They have a similar problem to Nashville just a spot ago, where they don't really have a great number one center, but they have so much talent and so many options of guys that I think they slot in just one spot ahead.
Yeah, I think it's really a lot to put on the weight of some of these younger guys, actually, because they really don't have the star power, in my opinion. They don't really have the faces of the NHL on this team right now. They've got a couple guys here and there that make some flashy plays, but I do think it is a pretty good group that does really come together, especially with their younger players. So I think as long as they're making consistent steps upward, like a guy like Marco Rossi, who has been talked, a lot about throughout the Minnesota media and the NHL of being a really good prospect for them. Obviously, getting his skates in on the ice of the NHL gameplay. But I think they really do have the potential to go forward. Obviously, lost some key guys in their group, at least for a regular season. You would think of a guy like Cam Talbot too. He's just one of those guys that were able to come in regular season wise and really take some pressure off of the other players in that organization. So it really is going to be interesting to see if they have the success that they had last year, but I don't count them out of being high in this division.
No, definitely not. And they did lose Kevin Fiala. That's a pretty tough loss, I think, for their top six. That's a point per game player last year. So I think losing him will hurt, but I think they have just enough offense to keep it going, right? What's his name? The top line guy who's like, Kaprizov, Kirill Kaprizov. Yeah. I mean, I think he's one of the best players in the league. He is an absolute stud.
He is, and he really did blow up the last year. So right now we're still looking. He's a younger guy too. We're still looking for some consistency going forward. I don't think he's going to slip down. I think he's just going to get better and better. But it's still really kind of a head scratcher right now to see if they all start to bloom at the same time and continue this consistency of high level play. So that's the only concern I have going forward, really, with Minnesota. Like I said, I don't expect them to have this huge drop off compared to last season, but I don't know if it's going to be as good as they did this past season.
Definitely. Joel Erickson is another guy that may have to take a step forward this year. He was their second line center last year. I'm very high on him. He's a good player, but it's definitely a leap he'll have to make that is a question mark. And, it's another thing that they have to take into account is Marc-Andre Fleury is now a year older. I think he's in his late 30s now. Can they rely on him for a full year to be their really number one goalie? I think that's a lot to ask of him. He's still great, and he was great last year, but is a big ask at this age for him.
Yeah, it is, as his numbers go up in age for sure. And he's a world-class goaltender. We got to remember that. He'll do great. He'll do decent in the regular season. He won't be bad, though. He won't be terrible. So it's really not in his vocabulary, nor anybody who talks about him. It's not in their vocabulary to talk bad of this guy. So he'll do his part in the regular season. That's why I still got him up pretty high in this division.
Yeah, he'll be good. Just something to keep an eye on for sure. And that's why I have them second, just because of that high-end talent on the offensive side. But in first place, I don't think it should be a surprise. It's Colorado, the defending champs. They're not the same team they were last year. That was a super team. And they took a step back, I think, losing Kadri and losing Burakovsky. They added Alex Gorgiev in net, who I think is very good for them. He's a nice goaltender coming from the New York Rangers. And they're not the team they were last year, but they're still the best team in this division. I don't think that's debatable. right
Yeah,
thing.
I don't think it's really debatable in the sense of how hard they work on the ice. Their speed is unmatched. It's just such a hard team. Every time you're an opponent going up, looking at the schedule, you're looking to when you play Colorado, and it doesn't even matter if it's at your home ice because they just bring the speed and the physicality to the game every single night. And they also get so much production from their bottom six guys. You got to look at a guy like JT Comfort too. Look at what he's done over the past couple years there. He's become a real physical asset for them as well, but also just recently started to put in some pucks in the net, looking really good on the offensive side here and there. He's got some good flashes, but it's like that throughout this entire team. I mean, you really can't pick one player and say, oh, he's god awful, he's terrible. There is question to see what they're going to do to replace some of the centers out there. As obviously, Nazem Kadri still not signed, which is a shocker to me. There might be a potential that he goes back on a small deal to try and get another cup. Who knows? But either way, as long as they got their top guys and McKinnon, especially their young defensemen too. I mean, Cal McCarr is probably the standard of NHL defenseman, at least offensively right now. So, and he's a really good defensive defenseman as well. So either way, this team is prepared to be right back where they were last year.
Yeah, the blue line is still intact, which I think is a big thing. Cale McCarr, Sam Jordan, Devontae's, those three, lead a special unit, and that's what's going to set them apart, along with guys like McKinnon, Rantanen, and Landeskog, who are obvious. That 2C is a question. Can JT Compher fill that? I don't know. So I think that's something they'll have to answer going into this. But I don't think that's a big problem when you look at the entire scope of this team. Still have one of the best players in the league, Nathan McKinnon, the best defenseman in the league, and Cale McCarr. They'll be fine. They're gonna finish on top of this division, but they have more holes than they did last year.
Yeah, and like I said before, and I can't stress about it, it's just their physicality and their speed that they play with. They have so much confidence in this group, from the last guy who made the roster to the first guy. It really is impressive to see how well and how confident they play in. And it's also every night. I remember just watching, I'm not a big Colorado fan, but anytime you would turn on Hockey Night in Canada, whatever it may be, you just look at Colorado and you see them dominate, just skating circles around some of these other teams. And they also play their divisions very hard. Their division teams are very hard. And that's really, really gets them to be successful, at least in the regular season. And then they turn up another notch when it comes to the playoffs. So this team, I think, as of right now, no doubt project them at number one in the division.
Mm-hmm. So that's it. Yep. I don't think it's a debate. And we'll have to see. I think they are the defending champs for a reason. They finally got over the playoff hurdles, and they should just be better going into this for that.
Yeah, a lot of their key star players who had never won a cup, they now have, and they know what it takes. So also it's going to take a lot of definitely a lot of extra thinking as to what they want to do in the regular season. Make sure their bodies are good, that you learn so much from winning a cup. So it is really going to benefit them down the road. But this division, dude, it looks pretty fun to keep up with definitely throughout this season, especially that mid-pack. I think we could see a lot of teams flipping up and down, just like last year, like we talked about Winnipeg, how they were in the playoff hunt and they were out, in, out, in, out. It's crazy to see how much talent they really do have throughout this entire division besides the bottom two teams that we had listed today.
Yep, it'll be a really good competition, and I think that's going to do it for us here, and now I'll turn it over to you. We'll move over to football.
We're going to flip it over. You're actually going to stay on with us, which I'm pretty excited about. We're going to flip on over to football, so I'm going to bring on our two other guys here. We got Shane and Ben joining us. Boys, we got a replacement for Tim on football. We got the hockey guy coming in, Sam, so make him feel welcome.
What's up, Sam?
Hello.
Alrighty, guys. We got a pretty good one for you guys planned out today. And starting off, we're going to talk about the preseason. It's underway, guys. But with that, some bad things happened. So the Jets quarterback, Zach Wilson, suffered a knee injury this first preseason game of the season. Reports are right now that he'll only be out 2 to 4 weeks, depending on when he gets his surgery done. and his doubts, or there are some doubts for week 1, but it is to be determined at this point. So I want to get some opinions from you guys. First, I want to ask, what does this mean for this Jets organization going forward, possibly not having Wilson for maybe the first couple games of the season?
I mean, I don't think it does too much for them when it comes to how if they're gonna win or lose too much. I mean, I think the biggest thing for them right now is they're fortunate it wasn't a season-ending injury or anything like that, because of the fact that they would have had to wait another year now just to see if Zach Wilson is that guy. I know this probably isn't his last year, even if he plays horrible, but you would have had to wait another year, and then it's like, oh, well, we missed a whole year from him. Now we don't know if he would have made strides or whatnot. So I think it's very, very fortunate for them that it's only going to be a couple weeks into the season, maybe not even maybe not even week 1. But I mean, it doesn't do too much, I think, for them when it comes to winning or losing, at least those first couple weeks.
Yeah, Ben makes a very good point. I mean, their record was they were going to be bad probably this year anyway. And I don't think if Zach Wilson's there or not, it affects that very much. But it just puts their entire development plan on pause, essentially, for the weeks he's not there. Their whole future really rides on who Zach Wilson is and who he can become. And you just have to wait a little longer to see what that is. And so this injury doesn't mean much for them. Thankfully, it's not very long, but it's just going to seem like the first couple weeks are just kind of a waste for them almost.
Yeah, and I feel like for Zach, like it means a lot for him, obviously, because he's at a point where he still has a lot to go as far as developing to be a true starting caliber quarterback. And they put all the pieces around him this offseason to allow him to show that, to show where he's at and actually get a good read on, is he getting better? Is he staying the same? Is the parts of his game that really need work getting there to a point where they can commit to him long term? Because this team, like I know you mentioned, guys, that you're not really high on this team. I think that from a roster standpoint, if their rookies especially hit early on, this is a very talented football team. They're still a year or two probably away from truly competing, but they have all the pieces in place, assuming they work out. It is going to be up to Wilson to prove that he's the right guy to lead that team, though. And missing any amount of time in this season where he's going to get a chance to play with all those new players is going to be definitely something you don't want to have to see.
Yeah, I kind of agree with almost everything you guys said there. But kind of going off of this little topic here, what do you think this means for NFL starting quarterbacks? Do you think they should be playing in the preseason as much as they do?
I think it depends on who it is. I mean, guys like Zach Wilson, yes, you should play them. I think it depends on how much you play them. But guys like Allen, or I even saw Mahomes played this past weekend for a drive. I mean, do they need to play? Probably not. Like if you definitively know that this guy's going to be your quarterback for the next 2 to 3 years, I wouldn't play him. Whether it's, I mean, I guess the guys that you could question if they're going to come in, kind of like Jalen Hurts, who you know that he's going to be the starting quarterback, I would still maybe play him a little bit. I know obviously he took that hit that everybody kind of was like, okay, like he was way out of bounds. That's when you yank him. You got to pull him. But, I mean, you got to play them at least a little bit. But it is that question of how long do you play them? Do you play them for a quarter? Do you play them for the whole half? Do you play them for just a drive? So I think if it's not a quarterback that is solidified for the next, like the franchise guy, then you play him. But if it's like a franchise guy, you don't play him at all. If he's teetering on the edge, play him for a drive or two. But again, I mean, it's not like the preseason. Not too many teams are playing everybody that should be the starters anyways. So it's really, I don't know if there's a correct answer to it, but you just gotta play it by ear, play it by what you think, how you think this guy is doing, and if you think he needs the extra reps.
I think it's situational based on not the same things you mentioned, Ben, but for me, it would be a combination of really a few things. One, is this quarterback comfortable with the offense that he's running? Has he run this offense for a couple of years? Is there a new coordinator that he's dealing with? Is there a new quarterback coach? Is the players around him different than they were last year? Significantly so, right? Like in Mahomes' case, yeah, we know he doesn't need to knock the rust off. We know he can play, but he has an entirely new receiving core outside of Travis Kelce, basically. Like this is, guys that he hasn't played with at all. And obviously you don't want to play them a lot, but you want to just give them a chance to kind of get used to the guys, see how they play against a live defense, maybe get hit a little bit. I know a lot of quarterbacks talk about that's kind of when their season starts, is when they take a couple hits. So like it is situational. Like, does the quarterback want to play? Is it important to them? Do you think they need to knock off some rust if you're maybe a guy who missed time the year before or whatever the case may be? But especially if you're a quarterback that I would say is a veteran who, like you said, is the guaranteed starter, your offense is the same, the guys around you are most the same. Those are the guys where maybe you can say, hey, we even if you want to play, let's maybe just save it for week 1 and not have to really worry about anyone hitting you.
Yeah, and injuries in football it's just part of the game, right? And it's something you have to take into account always. It's definitely a tough decision either way, but I think there's always so much to be gained from these preseason games. And even if it's a quarterback that is going to be the starter, it's a lock, there's always new weapons, there's always new pieces that need the reps. And I think having that chemistry built with the starting unit in these preseason games, I think it's important. I think there's definitely stuff to be gained from having your entire first unit out there together and playing in stuff in a time that is a live game intensity, but isn't live game stakes. So you can try things, you can learn things about each other. I think it's valuable, and I think they should be playing at least a little bit.
Yeah, the way I look at it, obviously, I think any rookie that's basically still under their rookie contract or basically towards the beginning of their rookie contract, they should be getting the reps. They need everything they can get. Like you were talking about, Ben, also we need to see what these kids can do, what they're able to do athletically, how they're able to read plays. It's a time for them to learn. It's essentially a practice, right? Just it's against not their own players, the guys they've been seeing for about a month so far from training camp. So I think it's really important for the younger guys. As we get to the older guys, though, I think it's a little bit different. Different in the sense of if you basically have your same core guys on offense, if that's offensive line, especially offensive line, if it's wide receivers, you got your solid 2 guys that's been there. Same thing with running backs. I don't think you need a starting quarterback out there. You look at what Patrick Mahomes did this past week. I think it was necessary. Lost one of the best wide receivers in the league in Tyreek Hill. Obviously, there were times where this past season where Mahomes was able to be like, okay, what did Joe Burrow say? Just throw it down to Jamar Chase. Same thing with Patrick Mahomes. Just throw it down to Tyreek Hill. But there are also older guys who don't really have the movement throughout the pocket like a Tom Brady. He's just going to stay there and he's going to target to his guys. They better be in the right spot. They can get those reps easily done at practice. And plus, he's a pro. I mean, he's one of the best quarterbacks of all time. So it's in my opinion, I think most quarterbacks should be playing in the preseason, maybe just one game. I'm not saying every single game. And I think they just need it just to play against a different team and get a different defense on them and get themselves ready. We look at, especially week 1 across the board, so many teams are upset, and that's due to the offense not being prepared to play week 1. It's the defense being ready to play. So I think it just goes a long way to get them at least one game and get them at least a quarter of play in these 3 preseason games. So anybody got any arguments against that, or?
No, I do think it's a good point though. Like with depending on what game, like that, I was just a little surprised to see Mahomes out there week 1 of the preseason compared to like week 3 of the preseason.
Do you think we see him at all the rest of the preseason?
Maybe week 3 a little bit, maybe for a drive, but that's really kind of the part that shocked me because like you even look at Allen and the Bills, they have a new offense, they have a lot of new guys coming in, and you don't see him play. So I think I was shocked more just to see him play week 1 of the preseason. I mean, I guess if it kind of makes a little sense with like say Zach Wilson like this, where if they do get hurt, you'd rather have it be week 1 so they can come back earlier. But I mean, it really is, I think, just a lot about it's different with every quarterback.
Well, it's different with every quarterback, and it's different with all these coaching staffs and all their moves.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, I would love to see a Josh Allen out there for a quarter or a couple drives with this new offensive coordinator and Ken Dorsey, him calling the plays. You got to see what they're able to do before you go into week 1 because you don't want to ultimately, let's see, the Bills last season, they lost their first game against the Steelers. Shane, you're probably pretty happy to hear that. But if you look at it from Ben and our perspective, us being fans and keeping up with the team a lot, you could tell the offense wasn't ready. It just, they weren't in that groove yet. And then obviously next week they started to take off a little bit more. It goes for that throughout the entire league. A lot of these teams, offense is never prepared and ready for week one. And if you're really trying to be one of those teams that go out and win a conference title in the regular season, every game matters.
I think it's interesting too because, and this is just the case really across the league, and it starts in camp and it extends usually through the beginning of the season. Defenses are always ahead of schedule compared to offenses to start every year, right? Because it's just defense doesn't have quite as many moving parts in general. The schemes don't tend to change as much year to year. The players in general also don't change as much with the different offenses teams will move to. And it just takes time with offense, right? Like it's so much more. It is obviously about execution on defense, but if you can get away with talent kind of getting you out of situations on defense occasionally more than offense at this point in the league. So you do see that gap to start every year. So the more prepared you can be, the less likely it's a problem week one. Like you said, it was a problem for the Bills last year and for a lot of teams.
Yeah, it's obviously just that type of year when all these teams are getting ready to go and some sides of the ball just don't really have that hot of a start. It's a really interesting question to bring up and talk about each year because we see these injuries happen. The odd thing is obviously Wilson with this non-contact injury makes you wonder and think about obviously it being turf. Maybe it's time to make a little mandatory all grass field throughout the entire league. That might be a discussion for a different time. But really interesting, really good to hear what you guys say there. But let's get on to our next topic, and we've got the NFL preseason. We had some games, guys. So really, I want to go through, and I want you guys to pick at least one player to talk about, maybe two, and just really give us insight on what they did well. Maybe they, did really good for their debut. Maybe you didn't see enough from them. Ben, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I got two that, I didn't get to see the entire time they were on the field, but one I've been loving all training camp, loving them throughout the entire draft process. Shane, I'm pretty sure you are starting to fall in love with this guy too. So I got two of them, I guess, but they're both on the same team. Kenny Pickett did make his debut. A pretty good debut, I think. I mean, it definitely could have gone a lot worse, could have gone a lot better, but I liked it. I mean, he obviously, I think it was a game-winning touchdown, if I'm not correct.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And then the other guy, which is the other guy that I was saying, which I think a lot of people are falling in love with, is George Pickens. I mean, everybody knows that picture of him standing in front of the TV, just watching himself get drafted, and now he's making highlight plays, effort plays in training camp, and I know he had a toe tap catch this past week, so he's one guy that I've been very excited about to see this upcoming season, especially with the quarterback situation they have over there in Pittsburgh. Is it going to be Trubisky? Is it going to be Mason Rudolph? Is it going to be Kenny Pickett? I mean, I don't, Shane, as a Steelers fan, I don't even know if you know too much.
I have my my thoughts on it, but yeah, it's hard to say.
It could be anybody week one, I feel like. But yeah, I mean, he's one guy that I think I think they made the right decision letting Juju walk and bringing in Pickens to see if he can be that difference maker. Because I think he will be a huge, huge difference maker in that offense. So, I mean, as much as I hate to say it, with Pittsburgh and Buffalo kind of being at each other's throats these past few years, with these upcoming years, but yeah, two Pittsburgh guys who are really, I can't wait to see Pickett more though too. Like that's the thing is Pickett. Obviously, I know people said training camp he was a little up and down every day. He had some really bad days. He had some all right days, whatnot. But I'm excited to see him a little more. I'd like to see him against a little bit more competition with like the twos maybe, or maybe the ones. I don't know. I mean, it kind of depends obviously what Tomlin's thinking. But I Pittsburgh, I think so far they're looking good with those two picks.
Yeah. Can you guys name a better duo than Pittsburgh in drafting good wide receivers? I mean, as a Dolphins fan, this is infuriating to me.
Yeah.
They just keep finding them, these second, third round guys that I would kill for one of them for the Dolphins, honestly.
If you just, all I'll tell you is if the Steelers take a receiver after the first round, just assume that they're gonna be ridiculous in some way. Like even if it's only for a few years or like maybe they don't get a second contract, like just go ahead and assume like whatever your expectations are for them as a rookie, just double that and see what goes from there. Like
Absolutely.
just what it is.
So one guy that I had my eye on that really impressed me is Desmond Ritter from Atlanta. So obviously moving on from Matt Ryan this year, there's a lot of questions for the quarterback situation there in Atlanta. And he didn't have great numbers. I know he was only 10 for 22, I think, in this preseason. But what impressed me is some of those throws were just on the money ropes, right? He had one I remember along the sideline that was just perfect. And also the dual threat ability for him is something that really stands out to me. He had, I think, 60 yards on the ground this last game. And I think for me in Atlanta, that's something that I don't think they've had in well over a decade because Matt Ryan was not that guy. So I think it's going to be really interesting, if not good, at least fun sort of guy for them if he plays at all over Marcus Mariota this coming season. I think it'll be interesting. I kind of do like some of their weapons, obviously Kyle Pitts. And some other guys like Russell Gage, I think, could have a nice year this coming year. So
he's in Tampa now, unfortunately.
So yeah.
They couldn't hang on to him. Their cap is pretty screwed up, so they had to let him go.
Drake
London's fun.
Yeah, Drake London will be good.
Except he got hurt, but unfortunately not.
Is he cleared?
I think he'll be all right.
Maybe they'll set him out this week just to give him an extra week off. But yeah, I heard everything should be good there.
All right. So regardless, he'll have some very good weapons to work with. So I'm very encouraged by what I saw from him, both on the ground and in the air.
Yeah. So I'm going to kind of just say the rookie quarterbacks were mostly very interesting to watch. Mm-hmm. Aside from Matt Corral, who somehow led a game-winning drive going 0 for 4, which is interesting. Outside of him, all the rookie quarterbacks had their moments, if nothing else. I think Sam Howell was very good for the most part for Washington against Corral and the Panthers. I think that Ritter definitely, he scared me in the same ways he scared me as a prospect, where a lot of inaccuracy, a couple bad decisions, but you see the athleticism, you see the ability to make certain throws pop up. So, hopefully they can get something out of him at some point. Pickett, obviously, the game-winning drive was great, but he had an interesting day in the sense that he was very accurate. He was very poised, but he didn't really challenge down the field at all. And I think that was purposeful. I think they want to get him to be able to play from the pocket and make quick decisions, because outside the pocket, down the field, we know he likes to do that and he can do that. It's really not a question mark for him. It's everything else as a passer that I'd like to see him do more of. So that was still good to see. Took a couple sacks that I would have rather not seen as well. One to ended a drive on 4th down. So again, had flashes, had moments, so that was good to see. But the rookie quarterbacks were definitely the most interesting part. And then obviously even for, again, if looking at the Steelers, the Pickens situation has been funny for me because I've seen the NFL itself literally blow up about him. Like there's just been so many tweets and videos about him specifically. And I'm like, stop it. We know about it. You don't need to keep talking about it with other teams because I don't want them to focus on him. I want him to be able to go off. But teams are going to have to pay attention to him regardless of what his role is. And it's going to be the number 2 outside receiver with Claypool in the slot. But whatever his role is going to be, it's going to be fun for me to watch. And as far as quarterbacks go, I'll just throw this out there. I would be very surprised if Trubisky's not the starter for at least the first half of the season. So,
I would say I agree with you there, not being a homer for Mitchell Trubisky by any means. But, guys, I'm going to talk about some of the, most talked about guys at the draft, and that's the first 2 picks in the draft, Trayvon Walker and Aiden Hutchinson. I thought these guys had a phenomenal debut. Walker obviously had a forced fumble and forced a holding penalty in his first couple drives in the game. So really good things coming from the first overall pick. But realistically for me, it was the guy who was moonwalking all over the offense, and that was Aiden Hutchinson. I mean, let's be real, guys. First play, his first snap goes and tackles for a loss on a running back. I think it was like a 4-yard loss. Mm-hmm. And he's forcing holding penalties. He's getting double teamed right off the bat. This guy is so athletic. He's huge. and he's going to be a force to be reckoned with over the next 10 years in this league. And he's only played a preseason game. I mean, this guy is just something else. He's something special. I think it's very important for us to talk about it. It just seems to me for a Detroit Lions defensive line that really doesn't have a lot of swagger, he's bringing it ultimately. I really do love what he's doing there. I think Detroit got a steal having him fall to number 2, and we all projected him to go number 1 overall. And then second off, I'm going to make a quick mention, and this is going to go to my homers, the Bills defense. All right, let's be real. They played the Colts, and the Colts started basically almost everybody on their offense, and they were unable to score a touchdown. And the Colts had great field position throughout the game because the Bills' offense was not going very well with Case Keenum at quarterback to start off the game. But the Bills' defense really did surge up, and they didn't have really any of their starters in whatsoever. This is all second and third team guys. It shows you what Brandon Beane's been doing over the past 5 years in Buffalo. He just keeps drafting gold. I mentioned a guy in like Boogie Basham who really made an interesting play, being able to sack Nick Foles, and ultimately a new rookie in Terrell Bernard was able to run it back for a touchdown. But they just put pressure on that really good Colts offensive line. So for me, that's an eye breaker to me. Obviously, the Bills' first overall pick to Kaiir Elam was fantastic. He's probably one of the most physical corners I've seen, at least from a rookie class, in a long, long time.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think I'll say one last thing on the Bills. The big worry with the Bills was, are we going to be okay without Trey White? I think we'll be
I think we're going to be more than okay.
With Benford, the 7th round pick, played. I mean, he looks amazing. And then, I mean, you got Elam, and I mean, Tim Settle blowing up Quentin Nelson.
Tim Settle's low-key very good. I'm surprised that he didn't get more offers on the open market, honestly. I know he signed a decent contract for you guys, but he should have been playing more to this point. Just Washington's D-line is just too crazy to break through. So
I don't mean to turn this into a giant Bills talk by any means. I love to do it. But real quick, you're going to see some really notable players get cut from the Bills this year.
Mm-hmm.
Just on the process that Brandon Beane has done here, every single guy he drafts has a legitimate chance of making this team and proving it to themselves. And it's definitely going to start to hit when Josh Allen's contract hits next season. So be on the look for it. You might see a wide receiver in like Jamison Crowder be cut this year, even a tight end in O.J. Howard. And I think this is also going to be Jordan Poyer's last season as a Buffalo Bill down the road. I'm going to say it right now. We'll see if it happens. I'm saying it here first. So that's going to wrap it up for my preseason talk. Anybody else got anything they want to talk about?
Oh, I guess real quick, I can just say I did not hate seeing a certain player in the NFL struggle this week.
Right. Yeah, that didn't go so well.
Over in Cleveland, but
yeah, that didn't go so well. But
we'll probably be talking about that again in a week or two.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, boys, let's get into the last topic, the main topic of the evening. And we're going to go through the NFC South and predict their records for this upcoming season. Man, this is kind of a interesting division besides the top Bucks, no pun intended. But we're going to go on and start off with the Atlanta Falcons. Who wants to go first on this one?
I'll take it just because the Falcons are an interesting team for me. In general, I see them winning probably at most about 6 games and could go anywhere between 3 and 6, honestly, wins total. I'm going to kind of settle on like a 5-12 season. I think they're in a point where they're going to be competitive in enough games to get those 5 wins, but probably not much more than that. They're probably going to steal a game or 2 from the Saints or Bucks just because that's what happens in the division, honestly. I wouldn't be surprised if they struggled to beat the Panthers even, because I think that with Mayfield, the quarterback, they're going to at least be able to be better than I anticipated them being. Because there's kind of a toss-up between them and the Panthers for the worst team in this division until that happened. I did not want to see Sam Darnold start games again for them. So that kind of raises their floor a little bit. But I do think they're going to settle in right around like 5-12 overall.
Yeah, I think realistically, I think they're going to be a 5-12 team as well. They don't have the overall talent on offense, defense, and special teams to really compete against some of these high-level teams. And you look at their schedule.
Yeah.
I mean, my goodness, guys. I mean,
It's
the
tough.
first 8 games are going to be a nightmare for them. They may be able to get a couple games here and there. I know Mariota is a dual threat quarterback, able to make some plays. He's a real hell of an athlete, but ultimately they don't have enough talent on that offense to outscore these first couple teams that they're going to be playing against, especially with some of the defenses they'll be matched up against. So 5-12 for me.
Yeah, I can't see 5 wins sounds about right. I can't see them going much higher than that. If Mariota ends up being the long-term starter, that might steal them a game or two on the back end, but I just don't think that that's the right direction for them long-term. Obviously, we talked about Ritter earlier. The flashes are there, but the consistency is not. And if they choose to pivot to him, it might even be a little lower later in that season.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a friendly schedule to them at all. I mean, you start out with the Saints, Rams, and then, I mean, Browns, obviously, we don't know about in week 4.
Right.
But even just like weeks 5 through 9, I mean, those are not easy games. You got the Bucks, 49ers, Bengals, Panthers, I guess you could, against at least the Falcons will be a tough game. And then the Chargers. I mean, those are all playoff teams besides Carolina. So I have them going 4-13, right around where everybody else is. I could see them squeaking out a few more games, but after week 14, they'll probably be out of the playoffs by then, and I think you see Ritter at least finish out the season with those 4 games if he's not already in by then. So, yeah, unless Mariota comes out and just balls out, but I would not bet on that.
Yeah.
Alrighty, let's move on to our next team here, and we've got the Panthers. Really interesting. Obviously, acquired Baker Mayfield in a trade recently, so they're saying right now they've got their quarterback. Obviously, up for debate across the league. To me, we've talked about Christian McCaffrey too. He is a just crucial piece for this offense, and that's the difference for me. At least them getting a couple wins throughout the season. Ben, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, again, obviously all 4 teams play similar schedules besides one team, I believe. But, yeah, I don't expect much from the Panthers. I mean, I have them at 4-13 again also, but
are they winning week 1?
Week 1.
Even with Watson in?
I have them losing. I do have them losing just because I can imagine Baker week 1. Just
the revenge game. Come on, man. He's going to have
I'd
that
love
big
to see
chip
it.
on his shoulder.
I would absolutely love it. I would be rooting for it 150%. I just don't know if I necessarily see it against a Browns team who probably still knows Baker's tendencies a pretty good amount. So I have them going 4-13, but I could see them being like a 7-10 team, depending on, again, if McCaffrey can stay healthy, because he's that good of a player where he can make it. He literally can win 3 extra games for you.
Well, it's week 1, so we got to hope that he can get at least through week 1.
Yeah, hopefully, week 1, hopefully he'll get through that. But, yeah, I don't expect much for the Panthers unless Baker comes out and really, again, he proves that Cleveland made a wrong decision letting him go. I do want him to succeed. I just, with everything that's happened in his career so far, with the injuries, with the backlash, with leaving Cleveland kind of in an ugly way, I just don't know if all of that on top of the skill that he already has will come together and he'll be able to put it together, especially in Carolina, because I'm not too high on Matt Rule there as the coach there. So I say 4-13, between 7-10, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not super low on what Carolina has going for them. Obviously, a lot of what I'm predicting is based on the health of this team, and Christian McCaffrey's health is always a question mark. But I could see them closer to the 7 or 8 win mark as opposed to the 4 or 5 win mark. I think they have some nice pieces all up and down that roster, especially with DJ Moore at receiver and McCaffrey, we mentioned. I think they're going to be a tough team to game plan against, specifically because they're kind of unpredictable on the offensive side of the ball. And for that, I mean, Baker, it's a question mark, but I think it's enough of an upgrade that over Darnold that it's going to be something that teams have to game plan for. And they were pretty good to start last year before injuries hit. So for that reason, I'm saying higher, like 7 or 8 wins.
I think it's tough with the Panthers because I think that this roster, the talent alone is worth like 9 wins. I think if you had a really high-level coach and you had everything go your way, you could easily hit 9 wins. But, and Ben mentioned this, I don't think Matt Rule is a high-level coach, at least right now, and he hasn't really shown me anything so far to believe that. And this is a tough schedule and a tough division. I think that their ceiling is still maybe 8 wins, and that's if they can split with maybe everybody with Tampa and then try to pick up a couple wins at the end of the year against teams like hopefully my Steelers are still in it, but if they're not really in it anymore, if the Lions aren't in it in December, like maybe they can pick up some wins there. But in general, I think this is probably closer to 7 or 8 wins just because of the schedule and the fact that Roll is probably going to get in his own way at some point. But the talent on defense especially, and even on offense with guys like Moore, if McCaffrey's healthy, even Robbie Anderson, hopefully with a better quarterback, won't be as having as much of a down year. So I do believe in the talent level on this team in general. Even Baker, I do think that he's at least like a top 20-ish quarterback when he's healthy. That's enough in a week NFC with all the movement to the AFC that you can get 7, 8, 9 wins. It's going to take them being healthy and for things to break their way.
I agree. Real quick, how many games do they need to win to keep Matt Rule there as head coach for the following season?
9.
Yeah, 9.
They need a winning season.
Maybe
a winning season, and probably
8,
like
9,
a card. Yeah,
8 and 9. I think it depends. Again, I mean, a lot of it does, which is sad. It depends if they can.
You think at 7 that he's done?
I think 7 or less is done.
If they're 7 and 10, but McCaffrey's hurt again, then it's going to be a question mark again.
Yeah.
But it has to be 9, also, but they can't blow any late games because of bad covering.
Yeah. The offense has to be manageable this year and not be like.
Well, if you look at 7 games, though, and you look at the talent that they're playing against, you don't think that's enough?
Well,
I don't think it's worth it at that point.
Yeah, I agree.
Here's the other thing. If they beat teams they should, like if they beat Atlanta twice, if they beat Detroit, if they beat Seattle, but if they lose to a Seattle team or a Giants team, if they lose like 2 or 3 of those games, I could see Matt Rule out the door very fast, especially if they say they start off the year losing to the Giants, and they could very realistically start off that season then 0-7 before that Atlanta game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's really a coin toss right now for me as to where this team is heading and who they're going to have tag along with them after the season, depending on where they finish. So it'll be interesting. We'll see what happens, but let's quickly get into the next team here. We've got Tom Brady and his Tampa Bay Bucks. So obviously going to be the front runners. They're going to win the division, but I'll talk about how I think it's going to be a little bit closer when we talk about the next team. But, I mean, obviously I think they're going to go ahead. They're going to do what they got to do. They've got Tom Brady. They've got a tremendous wide receiver core. So, they're going to pick up I actually have them only picking up 5 wins in the division. I think they're going to split with New Orleans. Mm-hmm. But I think other than that, they're going to be able to win so many football games this year. Offense isn't a problem. Realistically, it's going to come down to what their defense does throughout the season. And even though they don't have Bruce Arians as their head coach, I don't think it really makes a difference because I think Brady coaches the entire team.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, I got them going 13-4. Their schedule, I mean, yeah, it's a tough one, but the Saints might split with them, and that might be the only team from the division, really. And then you got, I mean, there's no way Arizona, I think, beats them. There's no way.
Yeah, so, like, really quick, maybe we can talk about both teams for a second because, I mean, I think we both have Tampa. We all have Tampa winning, right? We all have Tampa winning this division.
Yeah.
Okay, so real quick, I'm going to jump ahead. Obviously, we see their schedule, but the Saints' schedule. I have them losing, or at least being in the hunt for the division until the last week. And then it's out of their hands. So realistically, they have to make a move I think, well, first off, I have Tampa winning 11 games, and I have New Orleans winning 10 games. So I think it's really actually going to be close. Unless you guys want to go back and talk about Tampa, I mean, I don't know if we really need to.
Yeah,
You got something to say, Shane?
I think the Saints are an interesting team because so much about
Yeah.
what is going to matter to them is what does Jameis Winston look like.
I'm feeling famous Jameis this year.
And I
really am.
If you go back and watch, especially the last 2 or 3 games he played prior to his injury, it gives you reason to believe that like their offense can at least be good enough with, looking like Kamara's not going to miss any time for suspension.
Yeah.
With Thomas coming back, with Olave, with even Jarvis Landry, who's at least a reliable slot receiver. Like everything about the offense feels like you can at least manufacture enough points for this defense to take over enough games to get you to 10 wins, right? Like that might honestly kind of be their floor if everyone's relatively healthy. Because so much of what they do on offense is going to be much easier than it was last year, and they still almost made the playoffs, right? And that was in a tougher NFC than they're going to be dealing with this year overall. So I do think that they're going to have a shot to be in it at the end of the year to actually win the division because Tampa's schedule and their schedule is so tough that, like, especially for Tampa, they play 4 or 5 teams that are on the same level as them, not even including the Saints. Like if you want to put the Saints near their level, and we know they're probably going to split because Tampa just cannot play the Saints for whatever reason. They're going to at least lose one of those games. It's going to open the door. It really depends on, what are these teams looking like health-wise at the end of the year. But they're going to be within 1 to 2 wins of each other. I have Tampa 12-5. I think that they're good enough to do more than that, but their schedule's too tough. And I have, again, the Saints like you, 10 wins right now is what I'm projecting for them.
Yeah, no, and for me too, I look at what happened last season to them without a consistent quarterback at play. I remember watching them play. I think it was maybe the Miami Dolphins. Maybe it was on like Monday night later in the week, and they had some quarterback. I forget his name.
Ian Book, probably.
Ian Book, yeah.
Yeah, I think
the
so.
Rookie from Notre Dame. Yeah, Ian
yeah,
Book.
Yeah, they were still in the game against
it was
a pretty good Miami team as of late in the season.
At that time,
They were still in the game, and I was just in awe about it. And I was like, how is this even possible? So right off the bat, they have a team that can compete without a consistent quarterback throughout the entire season. Mm-hmm. Now you get a pretty decent quarterback in Jameis Winston if he stays healthy. I mean, obviously, he's going to be able to throw for touchdowns. That's easy. It's just him coming down on the interceptions and turnovers. He can work on that a little bit, but also the additions to the defense, guys. I mean, getting Tyrann Mathieu in that backfield, I am super excited to see what this team does. And I think, honestly, having that type of character who was at Kansas City, obviously played Brady a bunch of times, and you see how they've had little engagements at it. Now they're in the same division. I freaking love it. I think it's going to add a little bit extra spice. I'm not saying this team has what it takes to completely dethrone the Bucs right now, but it's going to be interesting. I think they steal a game from the Bucs and split 1-1 this season. So I think good things. I think they're definitely going to make up the playoffs, though.
Yeah, I don't know if the Bucs are as sure a thing as they were in previous years, just because there's a serious distraction going on with that Brady saga. Not just that he wanted to go to Miami, but that he retired, then he unretired. And, he's out dealing with a personal matter these next few weeks. It seems like he's just not all the way in this coming year like he usually is. And it may leave the door just open enough for New Orleans to sneak in with as many weapons as they have.
I mean, possibly. I mean, I don't know. I think nowadays, I'll say this. From what I've noticed about Tom Brady, his days in New England, it seemed like he was very restricted on what he did off the field. And once he had left, which I think ultimately pushed him to leave, besides the team going downhill, I think Brady wanted out to kind of just be himself a little bit, in my opinion. Going to Tampa now, obviously, he's got the respect throughout the league. He's got the respect through that organization, obviously winning them a Super Bowl the first year, to the point where I think they're like, did what you got to do. We know if you're going to come in here, you've won us a Super Bowl, you've got us to the playoffs last year, almost to the NFC Championship game. Or did they get to the NFC? No.
I think they made
With Tampa
They were
last year?
close.
No,
Yeah, that's right. They were close.
Yeah, they
They were-
lost to the Rams.
But yeah, regardless, I think at this point, I don't think what's happening right now with the retirement, unretirement type thing and personal matter, I don't think it's really that big of a deal. But it's being made out to be right now.
And honestly, if you go back to their schedule for Tampa's schedule, like if they start
I got you.
4-1 to start the year, because they have the Cowboys, they have the Saints, who they're probably going to split with. You have Green Bay, Kansas City. If they can, and then obviously they have the Falcons game. If they can get through the first like 3 or 4 games with a winning record, 3-1, even 4-0, like that's probably going to be the stretch where if they only win 2 of those games, or even maybe one of those games in a really bad case scenario, they're going to be playing catch up. And yeah, they'll probably make it up because their schedule in the back half of the year isn't quite as bad, but they play a lot of teams that can play with them. I mean, the Bengals got better after going to the Super Bowl last year. They have them late in the season. The Cardinals, who knows what they're going to be like that late in the season because they always fall off. But this year's a little different because they're probably going to start slow with Hopkins missing time, so we'll see how they play. It's going to be interesting to see what their schedule, or what their, not even their schedule, their record looks like about week 11, week 12. Are they actually winning the division even at that point? It might take a late surge for them to actually win this division.
Yeah, for me, I think realistically, you look at the last 3 games for them, that's 3-0 in my eyes. Just
should be. It should definitely
the statistics
be. Yes.
that the Cardinals have been in the second half of the season.
Rough.
That's freaking ridiculous. But
it's rough, yeah.
Yeah, if you jump over and you look at New Orleans and their schedule, I mean, realistically, they got some competition, I think, in the Eagles. I think the Eagles
are definitely good.
But the Browns, Panthers,
we don't know what they're going to be like, yeah.
They got to be looking to go 3-0. Both teams have got to be looking to go 3-0 those last 3 weeks. And, I mean, even before that, I mean, they've got to play the Falcons. That's probably a pretty good test for them. And obviously they're going to play each other in week 13 going into the bye. So, it's going to be an interesting schedule to look at.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm going to go on a little spew here real quick. I like Jameis Winston. I do. People forget he can throw for 5,000 yards. He can throw. He can throw the ball.
30.
The only thing is, looking at this schedule, especially weeks 8 through 13, what does Jameis Winston really struggle with? Very, very good defenses. The Raiders, I know they don't have an amazing defense, but they have the offense that could keep up with them.
Mm-hmm.
The Ravens, I do not have faith, in Jameis Winston beating that Ravens defense somehow. Steelers, again, I think the Steelers will suffocate him.
We should, but we'll see.
Yeah, they should. LA, another good defense. 49ers, and then the Bucs. So I have them going 9-8, 10-7, right around that mark.
That's fair.
And the day that Jameis Winston beats Tom Brady in the division, I will send all of you guys crab legs if he does that this year. And it's not a knock against Jameis Winston. It's more just like, as you mentioned, Matt, Tom Brady went to, as soon as he won that Super Bowl in Tampa, you didn't really have a choice but to kind of respect the fact that he was able to do that. And he is. I mean, I think nowadays it's very, very hard to even make an argument saying Tom Brady is not the GOAT, because every statistic, every single thing backs it up. But like, I don't know. I just don't see Tampa dropping this division, especially like the Saints have a good offense. Don't get me wrong, but that Tampa offense, I mean, their 4th string receiver is Julio Jones. I mean, it didn't exactly take a hit anywhere. You're going to get back Godwin healthy. I know he struggled last year a little bit with staying healthy here and there. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily a knock on the Saints or anything, but they have a tough schedule, and so do the Bucs. But if against these two, both having kind of similar schedules, besides one team, and both of them having to play tough teams, I'm going to bet my money on Tom Brady coming out of that division better by a couple of games. I could see it being one of those, like Matt said, it could be a last week thing. But if I had to put money on it, I think Brady's going to win this division by a game or two, especially if it comes down to the last few weeks. And the only month that really Brady struggles in is September. And Shane, you kind of mentioned if they can go 3-1, or even if they go 2-2, like the only way I think the Saints have a shot at this division is if Tampa starts out like 1-3.
And I think that's fair. I would say too, if you're making a bet about Jameis, though, I would be cautious because they did beat Brady last year with Trevor Siemian at quarterback. So it's really more about the Saints defense. It's not so much the Saints as a whole. The Saints defense just makes Brady play like a high schooler. It's just weird. I don't know if it's just the personnel or the fact that they just play them so much throughout the years that offense, they just understand it now at this point, and they have such good talent on defense. But he just doesn't look like the same quarterback playing that defense. So I wouldn't necessarily make that bet.
Shane, you got to stop talking. I want my crab legs.
Right, exactly.
I would say this, though. What do they play, week 2 and
week 2 and week 13, I think.
If it's like you said, Matt, or if it's like comes after that bye week and they're fighting, the Saints have to win week 2. They're not going to win week 15.
It's tough. Week 2 is the one I'm looking at for them to get upset for sure.
I don't know. Tom Brady, I would be very shocked if it's a lot like that year that Bills had Fitzpatrick. Fitzpatrick to me they're both gunslingers, him and Winston.
Mm-hmm.
And that Bills defense was pretty good when we started off 5-0. But like I said, it's like if Fitzpatrick is a lot like Winston to me. If he can't come close to beating Brady, even with whatever team it was around him, it shocked me to see Jameis Winston do it. But I'd love to buy you guys all crab legs if it does happen.
All right, fair enough.
Yep.
All right, boys. Well, that's going to end it for our football talk. I'm going to head out. I think Sam's staying on for basketball, which is great. So I'm going to head on out here, and I'm going to keep dreaming of crab legs until week 2 hits. So I'll see you next week, boys.
Okay. All right. A little football or a little basketball now.
Basketball time. Yep.
Yeah, not too much to talk about. I mean,
no, not really, but
we'll probably fly through these. But I mean, get right into it. I guess we'll start right into it. Is the Giannis Antetokounmpo comments that came out? You know, he did say he'd love to play for the Bucks as long as he can, but who knows the future, what it can bring. Like right there, everybody would love to play for Chicago. So I got 2 questions. One, do you ever see Giannis going to Chicago in any way, shape, or form? And 2, what would it mean for Giannis's legacy? Because I know a lot of people say switching teams does this. What does it do for his legacy if he ever did down the road do something like go to Chicago?
I think for me, I don't think he will end up playing for Chicago at any point, just because, you know, it's hard to really predict that type of thing with a guy like Giannis, because I think that the Bucks' success is so heavily tied to him that the only way that he would ever not play for them at this point is probably if he's just an older player and they don't want to re-sign him. They'd rather retire and he wants to keep playing. And maybe he just signs, 1-year deals to extend his career, that type of thing. He feels like a guy who's going to be a Buck for as long as they'll have him, right? And as long as he wants to play. That's the first thing. I think that if he did leave, I don't think it would hurt his legacy at all, because the only scenario I see him leaving is as an older player at the end of his career where he is no longer the star, right? And at that point, when you've reached that point in your career, even as a good a player as Giannis, like, it's really less about legacy and just like how much do you want to play, right? Do you want to keep playing past maybe when you're as effective as you were as a star player? So I don't see that affecting his legacy. Now, obviously, if he were to make a move like, LeBron went back and that type of stuff like we see here, like what Matt said, that would obviously impact it, but I don't think he's going to leave early enough for it to matter a whole lot for his career.
That's an interesting thing, and I think you make a pretty good argument that Giannis looks for all intents and purposes like he's going to stay in Milwaukee for as long as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if that is more than just talk, to be honest, because he's got this 5-year supermax, and I don't think he's leaving before that ends.
Mm-hmm.
But after that ends, I think Milwaukee might be in kind of a tough situation because they're kind of stuck to this current roster as constructed for as long as it seems like it can, right? Middleton and Holiday, those are their 2 stars. They're great, but there's no real place to move or upgrade. They don't have moves to make. So if they get older by the time his contract is done, and he's, 29, 30 by the time his contract ends, I could definitely see him moving. And if that, maybe to Chicago, whoever has cap space 5 years from now, I don't know, it's impossible to know.
Most teams probably, but
Maybe if they know Giannis is available, everyone.
Yeah, they'll make space. Yeah.
So I could see that happening because, if players age out, he's still going to want to compete. He can move on. And I don't think it'll affect his legacy because he's already won a championship in Milwaukee. If you remember LeBron, going back to LeBron, he was criticized because it was too easy. He took the easy way out to win a championship, so to speak.
Right.
This wouldn't happen for Giannis. He won his championship. He won it for the city that drafted him. And if they aren't able to make moves to extend their window, it makes sense for him to leave. And I think we're past the notion that staying with one team defines your legacy like it used to be.
Yeah, I think I agree with you guys. I mean, unless, Milwaukee really starts to, tail off. And I know they are an older team. I mean, Holiday's older, Middleton's older, Brook Lopez is about to fall off because he is the oldest man ever. But, yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to see him with the Bulls. I would like to see it for maybe a year or two. I just, like Shane said, it's going to be like a lot of times now, especially with players like Giannis, those game-changing players, it takes a lot for those guys to leave. I mean, like Sam, you said also, he already got his ring. It's going to be tough for him to say, like, okay, now I want to leave. It's not like LeBron, where LeBron was, for the first 8 years of his career, carrying one of the worst teams ever to the finals and losing. And Giannis has at least Giannis has been shown in Milwaukee, hey, we can build around you, we can do this, we can go get guys, whatever, even if, say, Holiday falls off or Middleton starts falling off. So I think he'll probably spend his whole career in Milwaukee, except for maybe if it's like Jordan, where it's like the last 2 years where he's kind of not the same player. But I wouldn't hate it. And I don't think it would affect his legacy unless he did pull kind of like a KD or a LeBron, where they go to a team where it's like, all right, they don't need you. They just don't need you. Mm-hmm. And then he loses. If he keeps losing with a team that he goes to that's unbelievable, say Chicago in 5 years after it's up, if they still have some great players around him and he doesn't win, then it will. But I don't think we'll ever get to that point. I think it'd be kind of a shock unless it's really late in his career, because Milwaukee will never want to lose this guy. I mean, he's the face of the league, at least right now. So just a fun little thing to talk about. I mean, obviously it's not something we'll get the answer to for a while.
Right, if ever, yeah.
Unless Milwaukee somehow, I don't know, messes up in the next 2 years where he's like, oh, I want to be traded. But we'll move on to the next topic. We talked about a little bit last week. Bill Russell did pass away, but some new stuff comes out where Bill Russell's number 6 will be retired. However, there is the grandfather rule, where if they were wearing number 6 the year before, like LeBron James, who was wearing 6, he can still wear it. 1, what do you think about just his number being retired in general? And 2, what do you think about the grandfather rule? Do you think it's a good rule that they put in, or do you think they should just say, nope, nobody can wear it right now at all?
Let's go first, Sam.
Okay, well, I think it's a great compromise for everyone involved, because Bill Russell definitely deserves to have his number retired across the league. He's the first superstar. He meant so much to the game and progressed the game in so many incalculable, undefinable ways, and progressed the league way beyond what it was just by his play. But, I don't think certain players need to change their number. I think, obviously, the grandfather rule was put in specifically for LeBron. There's no way it was for anyone else. I don't know any other number 6s that were set on having that number. So I think it's a fine compromise. 15 years down the line, there won't be any 6s, and and I just wonder how it works for players who want to have their number 6 retired, like LeBron in Miami. That was definitely going to happen, but I don't know if it's going to happen anymore, because 6 will be retired anyway.
That's a good point, and I'll try to expand on that. But at first, obviously, this is something that had to happen. It was a no-brainer. It's just an easy slam dunk for the NBA to do this. They honestly could have justified it years and years and years ago. They just didn't feel the need to do it, obviously, with Bill around. But so that's an easy one, obviously. And then the grandfather rule, I definitely understand it, right? Like you don't want obviously a guy like LeBron James to have to change his number. However, I would have liked to see the NBA just say, you know what, LeBron, you're really important to us, obviously. Too bad. We're retiring the jersey, period, end of story. That would have just been, I think, funny for me.
Yeah.
Just because, then, because I'm sure LeBron would just be like, all right, whatever. Like, I don't think he would have made a stink about it to avoid looking like, an idiot about it. But it would have been fun to see how that played out if they did it. But ultimately, I get why they did it. I'm fine with that. And it'll be good to see, once he's done and once guys who are wearing it now, assuming many of them even keep it, maybe some of them will just say, maybe I don't need to wear number 6 anymore. It'll be nice to see them fully retirement. As far as like team retirements, as far as jerseys, because it's a league-wide retirement, I don't know how that will work. I'm assuming they could still do like a ceremony for it, but like it's not going to mean the same thing, obviously, because he's not going to wear it anyway. But we'll see if they ever do that or how that works. So.
Yeah, I think it might just be one of those things where it's like, we're just going to do it to honor the players.
Yes, an acknowledgement and less an actual thing they do. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I think it had to be done. I think, like you guys said, it had to be done. However, you guys were talking about where LeBron didn't wear just one number. He did wear 23.
Yes.
Also, so that brings me to another question. A lot of people thought that number 6 would not be the first number retired in the NBA. A lot of people did think it would be 23 because of Michael Jordan. So now that's another question. Do you think 23 will ever be retired because of both LeBron and MJ wearing them? A lot of people have them as their 1 and 2 ever. So do you think that will be the next jersey retirement? When do you think it will come? And if you don't think that's the next jersey, do you think there will be another jersey retirement that could come along? We'll start with Sam this time.
I honestly don't think they'll do it again. I don't think 23 is getting retired because, like you said, LeBron and Jordan both wore it. It would be kind of weird if they retired it for both players. So I just think they stick with 6. They have the 1, and that's that.
I think it's an interesting conversation because for me, is obviously we know how much Michael meant to the NBA, even though he came at a time when it was starting to hit a point where it was becoming more popular, right? Like he helped elevate it obviously to a different level than it had ever been before he came. But Bill's impact on the game, and more so not just on the game, but life in general for NBA players and sports in general and athletes in general and people in general, it's a different impact than what Michael brought. And I think that it makes more sense to retire a jersey of a guy like that than just someone whose primary exploits were on the court, right? Like that's what Michael's always going to be known most for. Some of his off-court stuff is obviously well publicized, but not necessarily the best things in the world, depending on who you ask. So I think if you're going to do this, it makes sense more for a guy like Bill. And you don't want to just be retiring numbers league-wide, right? Because obviously there's been so many great players, and none of them obviously to the level of a Jordan and LeBron, depending on who you ask. But it's still something I think that doesn't have to be done. I think you can leave it up to teams that they played for to decide that, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I think we will end up seeing 23 retired at some point. I wouldn't be
surprised.
I mean, it might be like where the Bill Russell situation, where maybe it's when MJ passes.
Right.
Maybe it's way down the road. Who knows? LeBron could be the first person to ever have both his numbers retired
for different reasons. Yeah. Reasons.
But it could also be one of those situations where I know it's happened in other sports before, where say LeBron retires, right? 23 then would Chicago, I think, already has it retired, but let's say Celtics say, oh, we want to retire 23 because we played Jordan and LeBron after he retires. I could see specific teams doing that. I mean, the NBA is one of those leagues where anything can really happen and teams can do a lot of different things. But I mean, Bill Russell obviously has done the most out of any basketball player, I think, ever off the court.
Yeah.
But there's a guy like LeBron, who, I mean, he's done also a lot off the court with
He has. Yeah.
schools and, I
Absolutely.
mean, in his community. So if we ever do see another number, I think that's the only one that makes sense is 23.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think Sam, and I don't think we would see it, like you said, if we ever did, we would not see it for a while, a long time. Like I said, with either MJ passing or even if they wait till LeBron passes, whatever happens. So Bill Russell does get his jersey number retired around the league. So that's a good thing. But let's move on then to another very interesting story. It's been an ongoing story this whole summer. This team, let's just say the Brooklyn Nets, have had one offseason that is going to go down in the history books for the NBA. With Kyrie, with KD, and now something else comes out about KD. Not only that he wanted to trade, that he might retire over playing with the Brooklyn Nets again. Now, I don't know if we've seen this, I think, in other sports. I mean, we've seen it with AB recently, saying he'll retire instead of play for somebody else.
Gronk did it
Gronk, yes.
when they tried to trade him to the Lions a while back. That was
Yeah.
a thing that happened on this.
So we've seen it a lot. One, what does this say to you about KD? What do you think now about KD after this? I know a lot of people have had a lot of opinions before this about KD, but what does this do now? And what do the Nets do? What should they do? Let's start with Shane this time. What should the Nets do, and what does this mean for KD's legacy and just now in general for KD?
Well, I will say that Katie himself went on Twitter earlier before the show started and said that it's a bunch of crap that he would retire, which I do generally believe because I don't see him just saying, like, you know what, I'm out of here. Like, he still has a lot to give to the game from a playing standpoint if he wants to. I think that this is something that may have been floated by people. This may be something that he may have even said to float out there a little bit just to kind of get the Nets' attention because it's been a while since we've really heard any news from this front. But I do expect him to, in a worst case scenario, I think he may be willing to sit to start the year just to kind of prove his point of like, hey, I do not want to be on this basketball team at this point. Please get rid of me at this, basically. But as far as full-on retirement, I doubt it would be anything more than just a ploy to get them to relent and trade him. I expect them to move him at this point if he's really this adamant about not playing, because if you're the Nets, even if Kyrie decides to play next year for you, and it seems like he's prepared to play for you next year with a new contract or not, you cannot move forward as a franchise with this hanging over your head. Getting whatever you can for him from whatever team is willing to give up at least a good enough package to bring value back, right? Because you have to bring good value back for him for it to be worth it. You can't just trade him for role players in a first or second. Like, you can't do that. You still have to get a good package. And there's packages out there that teams are going to be willing to give that at least gives you a chance to either stay competitive if that's your goal next year, if Kyrie is going to keep playing for you, or if you don't really care about being competitive, go for broke and get either young prospects that haven't gotten a chance to play much or many first-round picks to play with. I think that's the most likely scenario still.
Yeah, it does appear as though we're in the posturing for leverage segment of this trade saga.
100%.
Like Shane, you said, he's not going to retire. He said it on we mentioned. It's bogus. But I do see sitting out training camp as a real possibility at this point. Because look, you're not going to get fair value for Kevin Durant in a trade. No. You're just not. And that's fine, right? But I do think it seems like Sean Marks is not being serious about looking for trades, and Kevin Durant is trying to get him looking serious. Because, like, we saw the alleged offer that came out from Minnesota, where it was Anthony Edwards, Karl Anthony Towns, D'Angelo Russell, and 7 first-round picks.
Yeah, that wasn't
his offer. Like, what are you saying? What kind of trade offer is that? It's not going to happen, anything like that.
No.
So, realistically, this is probably just some sort of push, some pressure from Kevin Durant, and I think they have to get it done. I mean, you're turning what is a bad situation into a catastrophic one for this franchise if you do not get him off. And Kyrie Irving, same thing, get them off the roster soon.
Yeah, I mean, KD is definitely. I mean, he's had a crazy career, as everybody knows. I mean, he's
We'll keep it at that.
yeah. He had the whole thing in Golden State that kind of ruined a lot of people's image of him, and now he comes to Brooklyn, and they put together that big three, and then Harden's out, and now then Kyrie wants out, and now he wants out. So if I'm the Brooklyn Nets at this point, like Sam said, you gotta just get rid of them. You gotta get rid of at least one of them. I mean, who knows what Kyrie actually thinks if he actually wants to stay there. I mean, if he does, I guess keep him. But again, who really knows? Like, the only person that really knows is Kyrie Irving, and he's one of the hardest people to get just a direct answer out of.
I don't even know if he knows at this point, honestly. I wouldn't be surprised. So
yeah. So I do think KD, he's never going to retire this early. He's still got a lot of unfinished business to do, even though a lot of people think he doesn't even like the game of basketball anymore. It's like, no, he just doesn't care what you think anymore. He doesn't care what you're like, because everybody can talk about this. It's going to be all over for many months. But in reality, the only person that actually should care about anything that KD says is the Brooklyn Nets, and it should be coming directly from him. And I bet you it is coming directly from him. But Shane, you might have been right on that point of this could have just been something that he said, float out there just to get them to actually start looking at trades that are realistic, not looking to go trade him to Boston for Jason Tatum, because that's, again, something that's not going to happen.
And Jaylen Brown.
Yeah, like it's not going to happen. He's older. If this was 7 years ago, 6-7 years ago,
sure, we could have a conversation about star swap. But the thing that the Nets have to do here, and they have to realize this, for better or for worse, they made their bed when they tied themselves to KD and Kyrie. When they made the decision, we're going to go for broke. We're going to bring these two guys in. We're going to be the new face in New York in basketball. Like, we're going to do all this stuff. They made their bed when that happened. And at this point, not saying that was an inherently bad decision, because obviously if you can get those two guys on your team, and generally that's good. But it hasn't worked out for anybody involved at this point. And they know that. KD knows it. I think that's a big reason why he wants to move on and try to salvage the back end of his career while he has the opportunity to still do so. And they have to be willing to take a package that is not going to be fair value. We know it was never going to be as soon as we saw this was a trade. It was a trade possibility. I mean, Rudy Gobert got 5 first-round picks essentially traded for him and players. You probably can't even get that package. Like, only the Timberwolves are offering that package for anybody this offseason. Like, that's just kind of what it is. So you have to figure out, what direction do we want to immediately go in? Is it a rebuilding phase? Are we going in to try and just be competitive in the East and still try to stay a playoff team? Figure that out, and then you look around the league and you say, okay, what teams are even interested in him at this point? We know probably Boston might be from their offers. I still don't think that's likely. Is it a team like Miami? A team like that, like, are they willing to move some of their pieces that they have for a chance to go on a run with KD? Something like that, and get back what you think is going to either make you competitive, like I said, or help you rebuild, whichever one direction you want to go into.
Yeah, I mean, I think this next month or two is going to really it's either going to lose a lot of jobs or keep a lot of jobs.
For real, yeah.
Because I think a lot of people can guess this, that the Nets have already gotten their best package, and it was months ago, and they definitely declined it because they had way too high of expectations.
Yeah.
So anything that they're going to get now isn't going to come close. I guarantee Phoenix probably did send an offer over for Aiden.
Oh, I bet. I have to assume.
Picks package was their best option, and they turned it down because they thought they could get prime Michael Jordan from someone.
Right.
So,
right.
The Nets, they have, as much as they did the right thing in signing these two when it first happened and everything. Yeah. These past couple months, the way that they've handled every situation has been some of the worst managing I've ever seen. I mean, whoever the PR person is there, it's not gonna be a good look for them down the road, because it's been really, really bad, and it won't probably end. It might not even end until it'll be a couple months into the season. Yeah. We'll see what happens there. I mean, obviously, we'll probably be talking about this as time goes on. Before
the Nets Twitter person should definitely mute their mentions as soon as whatever happens. They should just go ahead and just turn that off for Once they make, because there's going to be a tweet, we have traded Kevin Durant to XYZ team for X players, and just be like, yep, mute, and then move on with your day.
At this point, if I was a Nets fan, and I just want to see that notification at this point.
Yeah, honestly, I just want to move on because they're being held captive by this situation. Like,
oh yeah,
I don't really blame KD. I don't think this necessarily hurts his legacy. For what's transpired up to this point does, I think, especially being swept last year, even despite not having really the team he wanted to play with. That's something that's out of his control to a certain degree, but the decision he made and what's happened since then obviously will impact it. But overall, it's hard for me to really blame him for wanting out of the situation as it stands.
Yeah, I think now it's just I think he's kind of sick of being with Kyrie. I think those reports came out. He's kind of just sick of that. He's sick of the management. I mean, obviously, there was a report saying it's either me or Steve Kerr. Even though KD was the person to say I want Steve Kerr in there, Steve's regretting it now. But.
Steve Nash. I'm sorry.
Steve Nash.
I was like, wait a second, hold on. Nope, Steve Nash. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Steve Nash, yes, even though he was the one that wanted Steve Nash in there. But we'll see what happens. The Nets, they definitely got their work cut out for them. But we'll go into our last topic real quick. The 5 games on Christmas were released, or what are expected to be the 5 games are released. They are Golden State going to Memphis, Dallas going to LA to play the Lakers. You got the Nuggets going to Phoenix to play the Suns. The Knicks somehow got a Christmas Day game. I know it's the Knicks, even it's like tradition. But somehow they did against the Sixers in Philly, and then Boston and Milwaukee. So I'll ask this couple questions. One, is there a team that you think should be playing on Christmas that isn't? And 2, what is the game you're most excited for here out of the 5 games?
So I think it's going to be tough for the NBA this year with Christmas competing with NFL this year. So they definitely needed a strong group of games, and they have an okay group of games. But 1, the Knicks, like we said, and 2, the Lakers even shouldn't even be that exciting. So that's 40% of your schedule looks kind of like a bust. But I think that last game, the Celtics and Milwaukee, that should be a good game. That's a nice nightcap for the Christmas Day schedule. I don't know why the Knicks are there. And we say this every year. What are they doing? There's no way they pull in ratings anymore. This team is not fun. And yet they choose them over other good teams. Denver, I would love to see with their young core back together again. Miami, of course, who just made the conference finals. Nothing for them. Those 2, I think, in particular, are 2 teams I would have loved to see instead of the Lakers and the Knicks. But overall, excited for that last game.
For me, it's all about Golden State versus Memphis and Boston versus Milwaukee. Those are the 2 games where I'm like, yeah, I'll probably have to sit down and watch those if I can or try to. It's just Golden State versus Memphis series last year was so interesting. And just fun to watch Ja go at basically the Warriors by himself a lot of the time because his team didn't really want to show up for him most of the time, except for the one game, the game he didn't play, especially when they beat him by 50 points for some reason. That's still one of the weirdest playoff games I've ever seen. But seeing those 2 play each other again will be very fun. I definitely like the Mavericks a lot. I don't know how much I like them playing the Lakers just because I don't know what the Lakers are going to look like. I mean, if Anthony Davis and LeBron James are both healthy and playing well, that might be a super fun, matchup. But I don't know if I can expect that at this point. The Knicks, I don't need to see them. Jalen Brunson, no offense to you, bud, but exactly, Matt. I don't need to see that. I mean, hopefully they're all right, so that way I don't have to hear about it all the time. But not really looking forward to that game at all. I do think Miami should be on here as a fan of the team. I definitely would have loved to see them. Jimmy Butler ruining somebody's Christmas is always fun. I think he definitely fits his style.
Yeah.
So I mean, if they would have put them against the Knicks, that'd be great because then I get to see them win, and everybody is going to be happy to see the Knicks get washed out of Christmas Day games.
That would have been nice.
Exactly. I would like that as a Christmas present. But overall, not a bad slate. The Denver-Phoenix game could be low-key fun if everybody's healthy for Denver, which isn't going to happen, but still be nice to see.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they did a horrible job.
No,
like you
not
guys said,
horrible.
I think they missed on definitely the Lakers. I probably would have liked to see the Clippers there instead if you're
Yeah,
going to
with
put LA
Kawhi
teams,
back, and yeah, that'd be fun.
or even Minnesota. I mean, they got that new
Yeah,
big three.
actually, yeah.
A Mavericks, and but I like if they do start it out with Warriors Grizzlies. That's a great way to start the day.
Yes.
Just
Yes.
you get exciting basketball action. If you do end it with the Celtics Bucks, that should be a close, good game. Nuggets Suns, I guess that could be the dinner time one where it's like, oh, it's on, but nobody really.
I'll watch
really
Jokic play, that's fun.
Yeah. Watch it as it goes on, but whatever. But I mean, Luka, you got to have him on Christmas. I mean, he's the up and coming star. Yeah. Lakers, you guys kind of said like if they're good, but
if they're good, which no one knows.
Who knows? They have one of the worst overall rosters, but again, they have two players that are two of the 10 best players, or 2 out of 10 best players in the league.
When they're healthy,
yeah, when they're healthy. But yeah, Miami should be on here. Like Miami and Sixers, that would be a great game.
That would be
excellent.
That might be too like X-rated though for Christmas Day. I don't know, because that would get chippy real fast. But
yeah, especially with PJ. I mean, PJ Tucker going.
Yeah, that's they were like
one.
PJ. Nope, can't have. Nope, we're not doing that. Sorry, can't do it.
So I don't think they did bad. I mean, the Knicks though are the one that, like the Lakers, I can see why it makes sense to have them.
Yeah,
there
LeBron. You got to have LeBron Christmas.
You have 2 stars. They could be a good team, but there's no way I see the Knicks being good. Even like
at least not good enough. Like who are you tuning in to see in that situation, other than the Philly stars? So
yeah. So I mean, they didn't do a horrible job. I mean, obviously this is what's expected. It's not official yet, so who knows? They could just be putting this out there to see what people think, and then they're like, okay.
Oh, the Knicks, we kind of have to put them there, but maybe we don't have to. We'll see.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. But yeah, that was the last topic. Not too much NBA action. I mean, the off season. The only action we are getting are those little rumors thrown out there, and the drama that the NBA thrives off of is their drama that goes on. So we'll have more next week. Any last words, Sam and Shane?
I think I got everything out that I wanted to.
Can't wait for that Nets saga to be over.
Yeah.
I think all the NBA world can't wait for that. So hopefully we'll have some news to talk about. Maybe that news next week to talk about. But that will do it for us here at the ATB, and we will see you guys next week.
Thanks, everyone.